Hello, everyone. I am Deb Scher, Artistic Director of Avaloch Farm Music Institute, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to Made at Avaloch, our new series created to celebrate the variety and excellence of the work Avaloch has supported. Each event will highlight one or two projects and will include discussions with musicians about process, as well as recorded performances of completed work. So far, Avaloch has hosted over 1,000 musicians in hundreds of groups and including dozens of composers. We hope you enjoy the diversity and depth of the genre and approaches to the creative process which will be presented here. Before we begin, however, I would like to thank a few people. First, our administrative team, Mason Donovan and Jenna Hall. Second, our musical team, Hannah Collins, Mike Compitello, Catherine Dowling, who joined me in creating these events. And last but certainly not least, Fred Tauber, without whose generosity the vision and inspiration of Avaloch would never have come to be. So thank you for joining us for this ongoing celebration of creative work made at Avaloch.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Compitello, and I'm here this evening with Sandbox Percussion and composer Andy Akiho, who are going to tell us about some really amazing work they've done together over a significant period of time at Avaloch Farm. And I'm really excited to share over the next few months some amazing projects that have taken place at Avaloch and really developed there. And kind of unlike our time in real life at Avaloch, I'm excited about Made at Avaloch because we're able to see how projects that we sort of saw in progress at the farm have developed and changed and become and kind of finished out. And so to that end, I'm really excited to hear what Sandbox and Andy have been working on. And they thought it would be really great if we could start with a piece that they recorded at Avaloch, Andy's Haiku number 2. So let's take a watch. That was fantastic. So I'm going to turn it over to you five, and I want to know, first of all, can you tell me when you were at Avaloch, because I know you spent some significant time there, and tell me a little bit about what you want to share this evening.
Yeah, totally. So we spent we've been to Avaloch twice. Well, the members of Sandbox and Andy, I think, have been to Avaloch many times over the years. But with this particular project, we've been to Avaloch twice. We had a really long visit in 2018, which is when we recorded that video Haiku 2 that we just played, and then this past fall in 2019, we had another visit. And the first residency that we had was kind of interesting because the piece, sorry, we should introduce the piece that we're talking about here. The piece is called Seven Pillars. It's a 75-minute piece for percussion quartet. And when we went for the first year in 2018, it was at a very early stage in the process. So it was not that Andy had written most of the music or anything like that. It was more our opportunity to get to know Andy better as a group and really spend a lot of time talking about and planning what this piece was actually going to be. Like Andy had this idea, this really strong feeling that it was going to help him write if we had a clear idea of what the whole structure of this piece was going to be, because it's a huge piece. It's a full evening long. It's 11 movements, 7 quartets, and 1 solo for each member of the group. And so we spent a lot of our time at our first trip to Avaloch learning all this other music by Andy. So Haiku 2 is an example of that. So he had written these other pieces that we hadn't played. So we learned all of them, we rehearsed them a ton, and then we recorded them at the end of the residency. And then we spent a whole bunch of time just sort of sketching out what this piece would be. Andy, could you talk to us just a little bit about like what's the actual beginning of Seven Pillars? Where did it all start?
Yeah, it all started about 7 years ago, and it started with you, Ian, and Fat Stoyna and Gwen and Ayana. You guys started a quartet, and you were commissioning a couple pieces, and you talked about commissioning this one, like a one movement work, like 5 to 10 minutes or something like that. I got a little carried away, and when I was writing it, I was like, man, I got way too many ideas. It was like a kid in the candy store, because I had never written for specifically hired, like I was legitly supposed to write for percussion. And I've as percussion heavy as I am, it was the first time that it was like a legit piece for a percussion quartet. And I think I just got super hyped about it. And when I was working on it, I was like, man, I could think of a whole concert instead of just one piece, Because of that, I just recorded a bunch of videos. This was like starting in January 2013. That's how long this goes back. And I have hours of videos of just playing different ideas, putting on a loop pedal and having speakers, and just playing one idea and then going to the next instrument and playing over that. That's the whole Pillar 4, the glockenspiel little thing that just started as like a little loop. Put that on, had my speaker set up, and I was starting to write that at Princeton. And there's not really a percussion department there, at least in grad school. It's not like a conservatory. So there was a few percussion instruments. There was a glockenspiel, there was a vibraphone, and a marimba. So there wasn't that much. So I'm working with a very limited things. And then there was a jazz drum set. So I took a few drums off, put a kick drum, that kind of stuff. But with that limited amount of material, instruments, I just started going crazy. And I was like, all right, how many sounds can I get from this instrument? And that led to like, okay, I don't want this one piece to have every single idea I've ever thought of, because that would get, everybody would be sick of it by the end of it, especially if it's 5 to 10 minutes or whatever the original thing was. So then at the time I was like, I got to write a whole concert one day. And then, so then I was like, okay, I want it to be 7 movements with the full quartet, 4 movements that featured each individual crazy, awesome soloist. And all 8 of you are, or Ian, you're kind of 2 people. So 7 total. You know, because originally it was them in mind, and then over the years, I mean, that piece still happened. Pillar 4. I called it Pillar 4 because I knew there would eventually be 7 pillars. Hopefully, before I die, I'll write this damn piece. And I was like, I'm gonna do it. So, and that was always the idea. That would be in the middle. Luckily, you guys took on the project, and it was like a dream come true for me because I'm like, dude, they're really serious about doing this. They're gonna put everything into this, and the way you guys learn on music or anybody's music is phenomenal. So it became like a dream project. So a couple years ago, when we really pulled the trigger on this thing, I was like, okay, I got to remember the stuff in 2013. And then when we met in Avaloch, I mean, I already knew Ian, you know, Ian, you're like a brother to me. And then so I met the other 3 more, you know, like I knew all of you, but that was to really get to know you like I know Ian. That way, when I'm writing, it's more of like the Duke Ellington effect, where you're writing for individuals, you're not writing for instruments, you're writing for the players. And that's what I wanted to start doing. And then that was tricky because I still had all that foundation, all that material, hours of ideas from 2013. Pillar 4 was premiered in 14 or 15. When was that? Maybe 16. I don't know. It was written finished in 14. I think it was premiered in 15. And then, so we're working with that was already solid, note for note, done. And then all the ideas from 2013, all these old iPhone 2.1, whatever the iPhone was back then, those videos, taking the ideas, taking the architectural structures, and then applying it to our momentum. And that was the fun challenge. It was a challenge for sure, because I don't like to live in the past. I want to move on and write new materials that I'm excited about. But it was an awesome challenge because that was sculpting that towards your personalities. And spending that, what were we there for, 4 weeks?
And this is 2018, right?
Yeah, we were in the summer, right? It was summer
Like
2018.
late August into early September, I think. We took a little break. So we were there for 4 weeks, but we took a little break in the middle of it, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it was a significant amount of time. I mean, that's real time. It's almost too much, but I think because we enjoy hanging out, it was the right amount of time. Because we really got to know each other, and that really helps me. And then also, it was a nice collaboration. We could go have a drink, work till 4 in the morning because we had the high noon studio way out in the distance. We could play as loud as we want, and it's more like a rock band, you know. And then the idea is be like, yo, play this, check this out. Yo, what are these kind of sounds? How could this work? Even though I grew up as a percussionist, it's still when we got 5 heads together and we're messing around with different mallets, we can really perfect the personality of the music. It's more important than the notes on the page, and that's what spending all those many hours, 4 in the morning, late nights, just hanging, but having fun making music. And then I would go sculpt that later, you know?
Yeah.
That
That was a
sounds
long
great.
answer. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No. That's amazing. And you mentioned, and Ian mentioned, that you spent that part of that first summer also learning some of Andy's pre-existing works, right?
Yeah, so we took Haiku 2, which is a piece that Andy wrote, not for percussion quartet, for a completely different set of instruments, and we kind of built this new arrangement with all of these sounds that we knew Andy really loved. So we have these ceramic bowls and these metal pipes and all these wooden planks, like all these different sounds that we knew that Andy liked, and we rearranged the piece with Andy for those instruments, and we learned it. We did this other piece of Andy's called Empty Your Mind, which is an extract from this orchestral piece that he wrote, this Kung Fu Concerto, that has this little movement right in the middle. And so again, we made a little arrangement of that. I think, Andy, that was originally a percussion trio with electronics, right?
Yeah, it's basically like a quartet, but the electronic part, the percussion part within electronics is another percussion part. And we adapted that for Victor. Yeah.
Right. So we learned those 2 pieces, and then we really did. So we had played Pillar 4, which is that original quartet that Andy had written several years ago. We've been playing that, but we really focused in on that piece. We memorized the entire thing. We were playing it every single day, all day, every day. And then at the very end of our first year at Avaloch, we made a video out in the apple orchard, I think, right? Like out in this beautiful, beautiful spot outside, and we filmed Pillar 4 there. Another thing that we were kind of trying to develop while we were at Avaloch this first year was just our familiarity and our skill with recording ourselves. So we brought some equipment. So when we were trying lots of different things, like I think the Empty Your Mind video that we made, we did the entire thing just with Andy's iPhone. We like had this mic that you could plug into it. We did all the audio recording only with that. We had this nice like Steadicam tripod mount for it, so we filmed everything on that too. We just wanted to see like what was possible with that. For Haiku and for Pillar 4, we actually had a guy come up to record us, so we had a bunch of microphones and cameras. But we were really trying to get better at all stages of the recording process, the actual recording, the editing, the mixing, the filming. And it's something that has benefited us in so many ways because we do a lot of those types of productions on our own now.
And I love it. I love this video of Pillar 4 you made because selfishly there's so much Avaloch in it. So I wonder if we can watch a short clip of that right now. All right, that's awesome, and from what you guys said, there were so many late nights or early mornings, whatever the distinction
We definitely
is.
saw the sunrise a couple of times. There's some cool pics actually. It was like crazy looking
I
sunrise.
always felt like we had the reverse schedule of like everyone else who was at Avaloch. Like
Yeah.
when we would finish for the morning, I guess people would be waking up for breakfast, and so we would like say hello, and then we'd go to bed, and that was like the only moment when we really interacted with other people on a couple of days.
That's great. So that was year one. So since I know from talking to you that you're really excited about the 7 pillars, I wonder if you tell me a little bit about what happened in 2019 when you came.
Yeah. Take this one.
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah, so in 2019, we spent a little bit of a shorter amount of time there than I think the 4 weeks, the 1 month, the first year that we were there. I think we were there for 2 weeks or something like that. And that time was much more focused on the actual piece, 7 pillars. We spent, I think we entered into that residency thinking our goal is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but our goal was kind of to get like a sketch of pretty much every single movement. So I don't know if we've actually said this yet, but the 7 pillars is 7 ensemble movements and 4 solo movements. It kind of, you'll get to see a couple videos of, well, you'll see a video, you just saw a video of Pillar 4, but you'll see some of Pillar 5 and Pillar 6 as well. And the whole thing kind of works like a palindrome. where pillar 4 is kind of the middle of the entire piece. And then pillar 5, 6, and 7, there's some solo movements that are kind of worked in throughout. We have a little sketch of our, I'm not sure how relevant this sketch is anymore because it's gone through many, many different iterations. But this was actually done at our first year. We sketched out kind of a framework for kind of a skeleton of the entire piece. And you can see in the Roman numerals, those are the ensemble movements. And then in between pillar 1 and 2, there's a solo. In between pillar 3 and 4, there's a solo. In between 4 and 5, there's a solo. And then 6 and 7, there's also a solo. So each of us has a solo. And that's been I think actually been one of the really exciting things for us about working on this piece with Andy, because it really feels very personal, and it feels like it's really been written for each of our skills individually, but also our skills as a quartet and our strengths as a quartet. And that is definitely kind of featured in the ensemble movements, but then it's obviously, of course, featured in the solo movements because we each get a solo. So that's really exciting. So our second residency at Avaloch, we spent a lot of time kind of sketching out each movement. And that was, I think I took a ton of video those 2 weeks. I think I have like something like 50 or 60 gigabytes of video just from a combination of like everybody's iPhone, my camera and stuff like that. And just kind of getting an idea for what is going to be the sort of framework for the whole piece. We sketched out all of pillar 5. We had a couple different ideas for pillar 6. We sketched out a lot of pillar 2 where Andy has, and he can probably speak a little bit to this, but Andy really, in addition to writing out a score in his notation software, he also takes an audio sample of each instrument and each pitch of each instrument. So that way he's able to, when he's actually branding, when he's kind of like writing out the piece, he's able to also extract a MIDI file that has audio excerpts of each instrument that's been recorded. So a sample of each instrument. So I think we spent literally days bowing each note on the vibraphone very short, bowing it and letting it ring, and then muffling it so very long, and doing that for each pitch, and like sometimes 2 or 3 different ways for each pitch on the vibraphone, doing the same thing for the marimba, doing the same thing for the crotales, doing the same thing for the pipes, the tuned metal pipes. So that was a really long, tedious process. But then when Andy kind of sits down to really write the piece, he's able to give us this audio MIDI extraction of the piece that is using the actual instruments that we have. So that's a really useful tool for us learning it. And that's also, I think, a really useful thing for him when he's writing it as well. So that was a lot of our time spent. The second residency was just kind of sketching out each movement like that.
Yeah.
Can I add to that real quick?
Yeah.
Sorry. I feel like one thing to me, or one thing that I feel was super important with the second year is I feel like Andy created these like little like mini versions of every movement that were like in the sound world that we came up with in the first year, but then also had like little almost like miniature versions of the form and like the same kind of like texture progressions and like similar shapes or whatever, but were like, I guess, like versions of the piece that he could sort of teach to us by rote. So what we did for like a bunch of the movements is, you know, we were in our cabin, and Andy would say, okay, like Vic, you're gonna do this 7-note pattern, like do that 5 times, and then Jonny, play this thing on top of him, and then, you know, we would create like this super flexible version of a movement that would, you know, continue to evolve over the 2 weeks. But I think what's awesome is going forward and then kind of like going on with the piece, we had all these different versions of how some of the movements would eventually work and how they would kind of come together in terms of form. But we were also really flexible working with Andy just in terms of like what could be possible, you know? So like if Andy had to change something, it was like, you know, we almost were developing a language for like going back and forth or working together, which I feel like is so key, you know. Like, I mean, there's a version of a collaboration where Andy just hands us a score, and I think that makes a really different piece than the piece we have right now, which is I think reflects that exchange a lot more, or at least to me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what Andy was saying about writing for the individuals in this group. I mean, I think I can speak for the four guys in Sandbox when I say that we've never gone through a process quite like this for creating a piece. But that was really exciting to us. Like, it is a little bit different every time you work with a different composer. But this whole idea of Andy was adamant, we have to spend this time back in 2018. I'm not writing the piece yet, but we have to spend this time together. I need to get to know you. I want to do all this experimentation. That was a really important part of the process. And then in 2019, in the second year, he came with like the kernels, like what Terry was saying, of each movement, like an ostinato here, or a chord progression, or a technique with bowing the vibraphone here. And then he would teach us just enough of it so we could memorize what he was saying. He would give us a little form so we'd figure out how many times to do it or what canon. And then we had this goal that we set for ourselves at the end. We were going to perform a whole big group of the movements in this sort of skeleton way. So we had this concert, I think, at the very end, just for Fred and Deb, I think, where we played, I think it was like pillars 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus the vibe solo a little bit and the Glock solo, all from beginning to end, which was crazy given that, like, when we walked in on October 19th, or whatever the first day was, like, we didn't know anything about any of those other movements, really. Andy kind of shared all that with us when we all got together. And it was such an interesting way of working for us to be actually learning these movements with music that will be a part of the movements, but is not the actual music that's going to be in the final movement. It was a really interesting way
But
of doing things.
it felt like what we could learn was like the core, you know, like the essence behind the movement. And it felt like Avaloch was really just the perfect place to do that and to develop that relationship. I mean, the first performance of Pillar 2 was actually us doing stuff and Andy like yelling like little things at us, like, okay, now this, and then we would like switch to that. It was like he was like live triggering our performance in front of the audience. And now that we have the real music, it's like, of course, you know, we're learning that, but we know where every technique, the whole arc of the whole thing comes from. I mean, the final piece of our second year at Avaloch was also incorporating this visual element that actually, Andy, I'd love to hear you talk about a little bit, because I feel like this was something always from the beginning you were like, and it's not just 70 minutes of music, it's a 70-minute experience that, and it's crucial that it has something more gripping or some through line visually. And I remember you got us all on board with that pretty easily, and I'd love to hear kind of where that came from for you.
Yeah, I mean, first, on the topic of how we worked, I mean, yeah, that could be extremely inefficient if it wasn't done quite right with the right people. I think it works well with us, but not necessarily that could work with everybody, or even me with any, you know, like it has to be a pretty unique and special combination, because we really worked as if we were like teenagers in a rock band almost a little bit, you know? And a lot of that can produce a lot of organic material. It's crazy because this piece is actually insanely architecturally nerdy on the background, that none of the stuff that anybody really cares about, but it helps me create some kind of building so that it doesn't fall down when I'm randomly doing stuff. But to develop that vocabulary together and put that on the building, the structure of the actual architecture of the macro, the entire 11 movements, and each individual. When we do that, I think it can, it feels stronger to me, at least when I hear it, or at least the experience feels like more organic, but rooted in something that can hold up. And that's my goal, and I hope it works, you know, throughout. I mean, I hope I'm doing my part of that. I know you guys are. And I'm really grateful that we could do it like this, and I could really get to know you. So I don't want to, you know, that I could take that for granted, but no, you got to know that this whole experience at Avaloch, having the laboratory, having no limits on when we could work, having so much coffee, and then being able to do this with you guys is like, I'm not just saying this, you know, like it's really, that's the kind of dream I want to do. And when I write, I want it to always be like that. And 99 out of 100 times, you can't have this perfect situation, you know. But I think we're going to create a piece that we're happy with, and also that, you know, we'll always grow with, you know what I mean? So I think, you know, with all this process, it takes Avaloch, it takes your personalized, it takes Mike, it takes us all like collaborating and putting all this together. So what you're talking about with the visual thing, I mean, that's the experience thing is just like, well, first of all, I mean, we're also doing the lights. We can talk about that too, and bringing Michael in, because that's a huge thing. I mean, Michael's the dude, right?
Yeah.
Michael McQuilkin for visual, but just in general, the performance and the way everything we're thinking about, how are we gonna portray a ton of notes and energy to the audience without it getting over saturated or just only about music. Why is it important that people are in the audience, and this also pre-COVID, so either watching on video or in the audience, feeling that energy from either 2 feet away or up in the balcony? How are we gonna relate that to them? So it's just not a bunch of drumming and a bunch of notes. And of course, a lot of people think like this. We have to change this because we're not in the 1700s. You know, we have so many outlets to experience this. We have the audio recording. That's its own thing. That can be its own experience. We have the live version. Now we have the quarantine versions, and we have like a produced music video version, you know. And then now we've upped that by bringing Michael McQuilkin in and bringing the whole live light element too, you know, and hopefully, oh, so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, right before we dive into Michael, though, I want to show this little clip of a video that Victor worked on during our second year at Avaloch that kind of illustrates all of the workshopping that you were just talking about, all that time that we spent together. Victor, as he was saying, he has like 60 gigabytes of video, and he cut together this little thing that sort of shows all of that work.
Yeah, let's take a look.
Yeah, I want to see this, yeah.
Oh, that's such a great illustration of your time at Avaloch, and the really natural way that you all were able to collaborate. I think it's what I'm excited. While I'm excited for all of these Made at Avaloch performances, I think the five of you have probably generated the most minutes of music at Avaloch of any group so far. But yeah, Andy, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the decision to start working with Michael McQuilkin on the lighting and the staging of the piece, and sort of how that evolved.
Yeah, that man, that's another place Ian and I and Michael overlapped was at Yale School of Music. Because Michael was in the drama department. He was doing really cool things over there. We didn't really know each other. Actually, I didn't even know Ian that well till almost the end of my time there. And I met Michael slightly at the end because Ian was doing a show. A lot of the
Cabaret.
The cabaret show with Yale Percussion Group. Like it was, like Candy and John Corkill and Ian, and it was a cool collaboration with the drama department that they kind of put together on their own. Like, and I got to go see that show, and it just kind of blew me away. That whole experience, and that's those kind of things are what we're talking about. We gotta give the audience more than just a concert, I think. And that experience really got me hyped. Just that marinated for years. And then we had this opportunity to do a video with Michael McQuilkin, and we did No One to No One. It's an older piece of mine. It's like a chamber Pierrot ensemble type piece. And Ian's playing in that. I'm playing in it. And we worked with Michael on that. We actually did it at National Sawdust before it was completed. So
in the bathroom,
yeah, there was like exposed brick and springs in the wall, and we should have been wearing hard hats, but we made it. So we did this video, and Michael and I were like, man, I think we get each other. Like we're the same age. I think we grew up he grew up in Portland, Oregon, which is weird because I live there now, kind of, and I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, total opposite ends of the states. But I feel like we got a lot of connections. We grew up listening to the same kind of stuff. I don't know, just the same kind of vibes and visual. And from there, we created a lot of music videos. A lot from pieces that I wrote even at Avaloch previous to us getting together. And working with Michael throughout the years, just realized, he really gets my music, and all the videos always really work out really well. I get his aesthetics. I think it's a good combo. And so bringing him in for this was perfect. And then we were like, okay, what should we do? And we all kind of met, all of us. And he actually came out the second year. He came out in 2019 for a couple of days. Really intense amount of time. This is after they had the kind of skeleton of each movement. And it was not only to kind of share what we've done at Avaloch, but it was also to share with Michael so he can start marinating ideas about what we could do for a live show. And his idea was to come up with these kind of representing pillars, these 7 LED lights that can do crazy acrobatic stuff with the built-in Bluetooth and iPad and all that. And the thing is, we wanted to make it to where the quartet was controlling it. So we didn't have to always hire a sound guy or a sound person or
lighting as well.
Fifth person to do the lighting and try to line that up, because they're lining it up to on a dime, and it's cool to have each of the members kind of take over separate movements, or even within one movement they'll control the lighting from the iPad. And Michael kind of created this whole show visual element to it at our residency at Mana Contemporary back in early February, right before COVID hit.
right before COVID. Yeah, well, so like Andy was saying, Michael came out to Avaloch at the end of our second year there, and he hung out with us for a day or two, and he was there at that concert I was talking about when we played for Fred and Deb. We played through all these pillars, all these skeletons that we had, and that was his chance. I mean, he had heard Pillar 4, we had talked about the piece a lot, but that was his chance to see and hear some of what the piece was going to be, and then sort of tell us what he thought we should be doing in terms of the visual aspect. And like Andy was explaining, I think he had just done this show with these amazing lights that do look like pillars of lights. They're these wireless tubes that are controlled by an iPad. They can literally do anything. And he was really attracted to the idea, and so were we, of figuring out a lighting design that we could carry with us, so they like fit in this flight case that we can bring with us on an airplane, and that we can control ourselves on stage. So we don't need another person. The four of us can execute the entire show in terms of the playing of all the percussion instruments and the lighting design. And like Andy was alluding to, and what you'll see when we show some clips of this, we can synchronize the lighting design with the percussion playing to a degree that just wouldn't be possible if there was another person there, because we're rhythmically playing the lights in the same way that we play our instruments.
I think what's cool is I think you have a clip of Pillar 4, the same movement we had earlier, in this kind of new format with the lights. So
yeah. Should we take a look at that?
Yeah, let's take a look at that. That's amazing, and you wouldn't. The lighting is so integrated into the piece that it's astonishing that you can perform the lights yourself. So you don't need a click track, you don't need a lighting designer, and the lights and I guess the staging of the piece too have become so integral. It's hard for me, having seen and taught Pillar 4 sort of in its more naked format, it's hard for me to imagine it that way anymore.
Yeah.
So, what can you tell me about this clip? Where was this? I noticed it's not recorded at Avaloch.
Even before we jump into it, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Victor. He made and edited a lot of the videos, including both of the Pillar 4.
Oh man,
that's all his work.
Wonderful. Jeez.
Thank you, Ian. I was actually going to say that the lights are equally the most awesome and most stressful thing about playing that piece now, because Andy's music is really hyper composed and really challenging just to play. So then adding like a little button on an iPad that your sweaty finger needs to touch in the pitch black while you're playing these ridiculous rhythms is it makes it really stressful, but it is cool. And for the reasons that Ian just said, we wanted to build something that we could, that was very kind of something we could take on the road really easily, and something that we could do just ourselves. But yeah, Mike, I think you were asking where that clip was from. That was from an artist space in New Jersey called Mana Contemporary. And we spent about a week there in February of 2020. And we were kind of workshopping.
Avaloch was closed.
Avaloch was closed, yeah. And it would have been very cold up there at that time.
Yeah.
But we were kind of putting the finishing touches on it at that time because the premiere was actually coming up. That got canceled because of COVID, but the premiere was going to happen in April, and that was kind of coming up. That residency was in February. But that was the time that we spent a lot of really focused workshopping with Michael McQuilkin on the staging and the lighting as well. As Andy was saying, he was at Avaloch the second year that we were there in 2019, and he was there for a couple days. We played kind of these kind of sketches that we had of the movements for him, and his involvement actually really shined out when we were working at Mana Contemporary, I think, because Andy thinks about every single little detail when he's writing a piece, and he had kind of this structure for the setup of the piece, like literally how the instruments are going to be set up and where we're going to be standing and what it's going to look like on the stage. And Michael came in and he had this idea to obviously just have these standing lights, these 7 standing light pillars that were kind of working inside of the piece. And he was looking at them and how they kind of interacted with the piece and us playing the piece. And he completely changed the setup totally around. I think we spent like 2 hours just like moving everything around and trying to figure out what worked. And he was just kind of like, we were his canvas, in a way. Andy like popped in from composing and we were like, oh my gosh, I really hope he likes it. And Andy was like, that's it. That's perfect. That's exactly why you're here working on this with us, because you have he's got this eye for that. And that was really cool. That was something that we felt like we really accomplished at Mana Contemporary. And he brought in a lot of his video equipment and he videoed the whole thing. He set up all the cameras and did all the directing and everything. The only thing I did was edit it together. So that was really fun having him there.
And
I feel like
crazy. Oh, sorry, Terry. Go, please.
I was going to make a small comment. Victor was talking about the challenge of cueing the lights. And I feel like the way Michael worked is, we would play a movement for him and he would get a sense for the sound. And then he would kind of come up with like a design and then he'd be like, okay, cool. Who can do the lights in this one? And then there's always like a very silent moment where all 4 of us are kind of hoping that someone else's part might fit or might have a little more space for what are a bunch of kind of difficult additions to your part. Some of these have I don't know, what would you say, some of them are 30 cues inside a movement, right? More.
Pillar 4 probably has the most, that's the movement that we all knew the best at this residency. Right. And so we were all excited, we're going to nail this one. And in the beginning, Michael, he was using a different color palette for every movement. And for Pillar 4, it was just white light, which is really stark after all the colors of the movements beforehand. And we played through it and he's like, you know what? I think I just want to leave it white light the entire time. We're not going to do anything. And we were like, damn, we know this movement so well. We could really shine here. And then he was like, okay, let's add 1 cue right here. And then 4 hours later, there's 60 cues in Pillar 4.
Oh, gosh.
It's insane.
I feel like we share that one, Ian, right?
Yeah, we did show
that one is too much. One person can't possibly do it.
Right. We do it together. That's right.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the same with it's a 75-minute piece, but these solos, right? Were always going to be my saving grace because for 3 movements, I could just chill, go off stage, have a bottle of water or something. Not with the lights anymore. I mean, Terry's solo, which I would always watch him play and be like, whew, thank God I don't have to know that. Next thing you know.
Turns out you do.
Michael he comes over to me with the iPad. He's like, so you're going to control the lights for this one. And now all of a sudden I'm memorizing Terry's glockenspiel solo so that I can cue the lights during it.
Well, so Johnny,
we have a little clip of that.
And that's super intricate. Every time Terry has a rest, you have to turn off the lights. And as soon as it comes back in, you have to turn them back on. So you had to know it really well. And then Michael made Terry and I, because we we have the opportunity now to we've been moving the lights in between the movements of the piece, like changing their location on stage, but not so much while we're playing. And so Michael said, well, during the solos, the three of you guys are just hanging out, so this is an opportunity to do that. So in this clip of Terry's solo that we're going to play here, you'll see Victor and I actually lifting the lights and walking with them and moving them in all different places depending on where we are in the solo.
All right, let's take a watch.
I feel like watching the Glock solo is funny because I feel like in 2018, Andy and I, we did the most work in that year, in the first year, kind of, putting that piece together. And I feel like a bunch of that work was watching those videos that you talked about, Andy, where it was like you at Princeton with a camera like above your head, and you would play, some crazy thing that I can't play. And then you'd be like, okay, that has to be in. That's awesome. So then we would kind of like, throw that into the score. And I feel like we pieced together the movement in that way. Now I have, Jonny kind of watching over my back. So I have a lot less flexibility in terms of accuracy, because if I change anything, poor Jonny is left with a missing light cue, which is, bonding us even more in this piece.
I feel like running the lights in any of these pieces, it's like being a page turner. Like you can only mess up. Like if you do a perfect job, everyone's like, cool. but you can only mess up. And if Terry, like you just said, if you have a memory slip and play a 3/4 instead of a 4/4, we're gonna be like, Johnny, what the hell did you do with the lights? Why did you do the blackout then? That was the wrong time.
Yeah.
Exactly. I do your lights though, Johnny, so it's all good.
It's true. Tip or tat.
I'm curious, for those of us following this project, and I know we're going to watch a video of 2 of the movements of the piece at the end of our conversation. I'm curious what's next. I know you mentioned a performance in California, the premiere of the piece that was canceled. So what happened next?
What
Andy, you want to get in there?
Yeah, I mean, I think what our goal is to get this thing recorded, get some videos happening, and get a world premiere that's that we can share this. We've worked hard. We've worked hard for several years over this thing, and it's finally almost done. You know, can't wait to share it with people. It's just going to be really exciting, and that's why we do this. We don't, you know, we want to share the experience. We want to bring some positive light into all the chaos right now.
It's true. Yeah. I feel like normally when we get a new piece from a composer, we like perform it a bunch and like tour it a bunch. And then once we've done that, we decide to then record it once it feels like really under our hands. And that's just sort of like the next step. I think we were going to premiere it. Then once that premiere got canceled and COVID happened and everything, I think like Andy's saying, we've kind of like switched to those two. We feel like right now we're really focusing on just recording it. We're going to get a really solid audio recording of it in the next few months. Hopefully video will follow soon after. And we'll kind of use that as sort of our releasing of the piece into the world. And then when the time is right, we'll be able to perform it live. But right now the plan is to really just kind of focus on recording it. Yeah.
And it's like a world tour. And then it's like more like a rock band too. You come out with that, and you go tour it and get it out there. Yeah. We'll be able to do live concerts and.
And the plan was always to make a amazing recording of the piece. So we just thought that would come later in the process, but so now we do that first. I mean, sometimes that works too, and I think we're really excited about that because you know, like we were saying, some of the skills we learned in that first year at Avaloch were how to just like make a good recording and a good video of something just using the skills that we all either have or can learn on the spot. And since that year, that summer in 2018, we've only gotten better at it. I think we're excited to kind of try our hand at a similar process with the real thing, the full 7 pillars.
I think between the 4 of us, we'll figure out a way to do it.
Yeah. Well, and that's another testament to that first year, I think, is like, I mean, look, it's 2.5 years later, and this is such a huge undertaking. If we hadn't spent that time at Avaloch building that foundation, it would have been so easy to just be like, you know what, the world has thrown a lot of hurdles at us, it's just not going to work. But I feel like the bonds that we have between us at this point are just giving us more motivation to see this thing through and make sure that this piece can come to life in the world. And I don't think it could have been possible without those early days at Avaloch.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, it's a real testament to your collaborative spirit. I think that a piece that's so intricate and so detailed and so explosive that you 4 can develop a real intuition around it before the piece is even considered done. So I'm super excited. You've prepped me now that you have 2 videos that nobody's seen yet. So what are we gonna watch?
Yeah, so these are very, very new recordings of both Pillar 5 and Pillar 6, which are 2 of the ensemble movements of 7 pillars. And it's kind of a prologue to our recording project that we're going to be doing in the next couple months. Kind of these sort of in-house sort of studio, our own kind of like stay-at-home recording projects that we've made in our studio. So we've just recorded both of these movements in our studio. and we're super excited to feature them here. Ian did a ton of work, I know, on the audio, recording the audio, mixing it and everything. I've done a bunch of work. I'm currently right now doing a bunch of work on the video, but you will see it now in the next few seconds. So that'll be cool.
Yeah, let's watch it. That's so amazing, and I'm super stoked to see how this turns out in its sort of final format. And I know it will be really meaningful to everybody watching now to take a look at the final recording, because we now know how much time and energy you've spent on this amazing project. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know it's been a real joy talking about this project. I've been hearing so much about it from everybody. Everybody at Avaloch was kind of buzzing nonstop about this, and I'm super glad we got to take a sneak peek at some of it this evening.
Yeah, thanks so much,
Thank you.
Mike. Yeah, thanks for having us here, and thanks so much to everybody at Avaloch for helping us out in the past couple of years. To Fred, to Deb, to everybody there, Mike,
Pete,
yourself,
Diane,
yeah, Pete, Diane, everyone.
Yeah.
Anna,
It's been.
yeah.
If you haven't been to Avaloch, you have to go when it's safe to go, because it's just the most incredible place, and it's a place where, I mean, it's a beautiful place to be, but it's a place where real work gets done. It's an artist retreat. So thank you so much for having us there.
And if you're interested in learning more about this project, Andy and the four guys in Sandbox have some information about how you can continue to follow this project in the description of the video. So I hope you join us next week with the Urban Birds Ensemble on July 10th. Thanks so much, and have a great evening.